My daddy, the whole family, was held against their will. If you did leave, they either come get you or have somebody kill you or whatever. Jerry Dawson, he lived around the same place we lived on. He left, they went and got him, brought him back, carried him right down there from his house, killed him, hung him up in a tree, castorized him and hung him up right from his house where his children, everybody could see him. I'm pretty sure it's 55, 56 when this happened.
Most of us think that the end of the Civil War in 1865 closed the chapter on slavery in the American South, but that's far from the truth. Over the next 100 years, generations of black Southerners were forced to labor against their will. This new form of slavery happened in the shadows of the first half of the 20th century, and even though the civil rights movement began advancing racial equality in the South in the 1950s, these practices continued secretly, making it a difficult history to prove. Today, there's one woman who's dedicated her life to finding this lost history of black identity. She's been called the slavery detective of the South.
We're currently in Louisiana, about to meet Antoinette Harrell, who specializes in finding cases of essentially modern-day slavery. We're really deep in the South right now. It's super swampy and super rural. I was actually born in Boston and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, like early on in my childhood, but I've never been out this far deep into Louisiana. I'm very interested in connecting with Antoinette and learning more about her work. Hello, Antoinette.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Antoinette was born and raised in Louisiana, and even though she lost her leg to cancer a few years ago, that hasn't slowed her down from what she sees as a mission of justice, tracking down and verifying cases of slavery and abusive labor practices that happened after the Civil War. Sometimes she gets leads from newspaper clippings, old FBI reports, or recorded testimonies, and sometimes she just gets a phone call.
I got scared because I seen how they beat some of the boys. They beat people to death in there.
Mike, I appreciate you not taking this story to the grave with you. I know it hurt. I know it's very painful. And the state of Florida can't pay you all enough. But I'll be in touch with you shortly.
A few of Antoinette's investigations have been used in court cases for reparations, though sometimes the end goal is simply to give people knowledge of their family roots, which for a lot of black Southerners is something that slavery erased.
Let me first tell you how I got started with this. Researching my own family history. My family was held as slaves. Well, in 1863, my family was emancipated. And my family did become sharecroppers. Robert Harrell became a sharecropper under the system of sharecropping. The planter and the newly freed former slaves came into an agreement. I will furnish you with the seeds, with the land, a place to stay. In return, you would give me a portion of the crops. Well, not everyone did the right thing.
Although sharecropping was technically legal, the practice was widely abused by white landowners who used debts to keep African Americans tied to the land that they once worked as slaves. Sharecroppers didn't pay rent, but they didn't own any property, and today, historians agree, sharecropping was just slavery by a different name.
So many former enslaved Africans had nothing. They had no choice. At the end of the year, you owe me. No matter how hard you work, you were told, sorry.
And those cases relate directly to your cases today.
Right. After slavery, these are like 1921, 1930, 1940s, the 50s, and some of them to the 60s.
Antoinette's very first case was May Louise Miller, a woman who was held as a slave with her entire family in Mississippi until 1961. Though May passed away in 2014, Antoinette took us to see one of her brothers, Arthur Miller.
May and Arthur being two of the older sisters and brothers, they remember a lot. It took a long time before Arthur really opened up and talked.
We lived on I don't know what would you call it, but something like a plantation to me. It belonged to several different white people. They all was family, I guess. And you couldn't leave. And if you did leave, they either come get you or have somebody kill you, whatever. That's what happened. They did my mama bad.
What'd they do to your mother?
They just had my mother, the white men. They just do what they wanted to do with her. And I just wasn't big enough to do nothing. If I would have been, I don't know, probably wouldn't be.
And this was in the 1950s or 40s?
That was on through the 40s, in the 50s, all through the 50s, and part of the 60s.
So what would the repercussions be if you tried to leave or if you tried to refuse what they wanted?
Back in them days, it was kind of like you had to do what the white man said or get killed. My daddy's uncle, he made him dig a grave and killed him. They killed him and buried him in his own grave. Jerry Dawson, they killed him. He lived around the same place we lived on. He left and said he wasn't coming back. They wouldn't got him, brought him back, carried him right down there from his house, killed him. Hung him up in a tree.
They hung him?
They killed him first, castorized him, and hung him up right from his house where his children, everybody could see him.
Were you aware that this is 1940s, 1950s, that this is insane. Arthur, this breaks my heart to hear this story. Growing up, were you fully aware, this is in the 40s and 50s, the civil rights movement is just about to begin. Were you aware of what was going on in the rest of the country at that time for black people pursuing freedom?
No.
You weren't aware at all that there was any pursuits for freedom in the 40s and 50s for us?
No, not really. Not really, because I think maybe like in 65, 66, then they was doing that marching. That's when I really found out. People are scared to talk about it. It's people right now, y'all go to talk to. They won't talk with y'all about this here. They're scared to do it. They got that fear in them,
How could something like this